Our next speaker is Milena Almagro. I think she just finished a PhD in econ at NYU and is starting at Chicago Booth next year. And Milena will be telling us about location sorting and endogenous amenities evidence from Amsterdam.
Well, thank you very much for the organizers for putting the paper in the program. As you said, the paper is called Location Sorting and Endogenous Amenities, and it's joint work with Tomas Dominguez-Iino, who's a job market candidate at NYU. So the starting point of this paper is the well-documented fact that there is a link between an increase in inequality between households and increasing the sorting of households across locations. First, across cities, with high-income households moving to high-income and high-quality amenity areas, but also within cities. And something that we have seen recently in many cities in developed countries is this surge in gentrification trends. Gentrification is a phenomenon that is typically triggered by the influx of high-income households, young high-income households, into previously low-income areas that not only leads to higher rental prices, but also to a transformation of the neighborhoods. Services and amenities are going to respond to the demand of these gentrifiers, and they're going to start catering to their needs and less so to the needs of the low-income incumbent households. This transformation of the neighborhoods beyond rental prices and in response of changes in demographics is what the literature calls endogenous amenities. So one might think that the welfare consequences for gentrification is not the same for gentrifiers compared to the low-income incumbent households. So the broad questions that we want to answer in this paper are: what are the distributional effects of urban change and neighborhood change? And what is the role of that the endogeneity of amenities plays in shaping the spatial distribution of households within a city and within city spatial inequality? The research design that we're going to follow, we're going to build a dynamic spatial equilibrium model of a city's residential market. We're going to estimate this model using tools from the empirical and industrial organization literature, where we are leverage waves in tourism into Amsterdam for the past decade as quasi-experimental variation in demographic composition. And we want to think of these tourists changing the city the same way that gentrifiers change neighborhoods. Once we have estimated the parameters, we're going to fit them into a simulation, and we are going to evaluate the welfare changes or different counterfactual scenarios and points. Now let me show you what's happening in Amsterdam. So there's a huge, massive wave of tourism in Amsterdam for the last 10 years, and tourists are expanding all over the city. So in here, I'm plotting two maps. These are the postcodes, 100 postcodes of Amsterdam. On the left map, I'm plotting the number of hotel beds per capita, per resident. And on the right panel, I'm plotting the number of commercial listings, namely Airbnb, as a share of the rental stock. So if we fast forward to 2013, 15, and 17, we've seen that there has been a lot of changes in the spatial distribution of tourists across the city of Amsterdam, and that cities are reaching to areas that they didn't used to go, mainly driven by the fact of the short-term rentals Airbnb. Now, what's happening to amenities? Now in here, I'm plotting two maps with the total changes in the number of tourists of two different amenities. On the left map, I'm plotting touristic amenities. Touristic amenities include things such as souvenir shops or firms in the lodging industry. So what we see that is in red, it means that the number of touristic amenities is increasing for all the zip codes in Amsterdam, almost for all of them. This is in contrast to what's happening to private daycare facilities. What we see is that the number of private daycare facilities is decreasing for most of the zip codes in Amsterdam. And to the extent that touristic amenities cater to tourists and less so to locals, and vice versa for private daycare facilities, the main takeaway of this slide is that amenities are tilting toward tourists and away from locals. Now, in terms of the model, what are we going to do? We're going to have absentee landlords who own a rental unit, and they're going to decide whether to rent this unit either in the short-term rental market or in the long-term rental market. Tourists are going to stay either in short-term rentals or in hotels, and households are going to demand long-term rentals units in different neighborhoods they're going to choose a neighborhood within the city of Amsterdam. Because we're interested in distributional implications, we're going to have different demographic groups of households that can range from immigrant families without college education to young professionals without kids. Tourists and households, these different type of households, are going to be part of the demographic composition of neighborhoods, and they're going to consume amenities in their residential locations. And firms are going to start responding to the aggregate demand, and this aggregate demand is going to be a function of the demographic composition of the neighborhoods. In terms of data, we're going to use data for Airbnb, where we take it from inside Airbnb.com, and we complement that data with official tourism reports. For the demand for locations, what we use is restricted access Dutch microdata, which allows us to see the universe of households in the Netherlands at any point in time. We complement that data with tax returns and data on some demographics where we can see things such as their income or their level of education. In terms of amenities, we have a panel for all the zip codes of Amsterdam for different types of amenities running from 2008 to 2017. Now, just a brief overview of the estimation. What I'm plotting here on the left panel, I'm plotting on the x-axis the income percentile of these households, and on the y-axis, I'm plotting the coefficients that I get out of the demanded location. So this is telling me the preferences for rental prices for the different demographic groups that I estimate with my data. So as you can see, there is a decreasing relationship, meaning that higher income households are less sensitive to rental prices than low income households. If we look at some amenities, for example, touristic services and age, what we see is that there is also a decreasing relationship between the preferences for touristic amenities and age, meaning that younger households prefer more touristic services relative to older households. And now, just to wrap up the presentation, I'm going to evaluate the tourism shock. When I mean the tourism shock is that I'm going to evaluate what happens to Amsterdam after we see this massive wave of tourism. In my original estimation, as you saw before, I have many different demographic groups. I'm gonna group them into two bigger subgroups. One, I'm gonna call them families because they prefer educational establishments over bars, and the other one, I'm gonna call them young professionals because they prefer bars over educational establishments. So I'm gonna evaluate this tourism shock comparing 2008 to 2017, and I'm gonna do it in two steps. First, the first step, I'm just gonna allow prices to adjust. Why? One, am I going to do it in two states? Because I want to evaluate the extent that endogenous amenities, what is the role that endogenous amenities plays in this new equilibrium. So when I do that just with prices, what we see is that everybody's hurt. What's happening here, as tourists come into Amsterdam, landlords see the opportunity of renting their rental unit to tourists, and they're gonna remove their units away from the housing supply available for locals. This reduction in housing supply available for locals is going to increase rental prices, and everybody's going to be hurt by this. Now, what happens when I allow amenity to adjust and respond to the influx of tourists? That the city is going to change. And what's happening is that because most of the households in the city of Amsterdam do not enjoy the amenities that tourists bring with them, they're even worse off than before. However, look at Group 5, which is the one group of young professionals, that even though they are paying higher rental prices, they are being more than compensated for by the amenities that tourists are bringing with them. So just to conclude, when amenities are endogenous, the first thing that we observe is that the welfare loss is 3.5 times larger on average, going from a loss of 2% to a loss of 7%. So the first thing is that endogenous amenities are important for quantifying the equilibrium effects of urban change and neighborhood change. The second thing that we see is that it has also important consequences for inequality, because we see that there is a larger dispersion of inequality even by these two graphs. Sorry about that. And it also has important implications for policy. It's an important margin because in the paper, not in the presentation for today, what I saw is that we can use amenities as a policy instrument in terms of restricting certain types of amenities or promoting certain type of amenities if we're gonna target certain demographic groups.